Ye shall know the truth, and the truth shall set thee free. Many people know about this truth, but it's just an intellectual concept. If our knowledge of that truth is not really spiritualized in us, we really can't free ourselves of much that makes us unhappy in the world. There's certainly nothing wrong with the mind. It learns about all sorts of things, of course, but these things must be translated into wisdom if they're to have any practical use. And unity is about practical spirituality. Otherwise, knowledge is just kind of more mind clutter and can even be used by the ego to reinforce itself and become critical and cynical and negative and, well, egotistical. Part of that truth that we need to know about is about ourselves, because it's ourselves, it's we that interpret reality and truth. And that knowing about ourselves is the first step to self-transformation that we started talking about last week, a very, very advanced spiritual teaching. Not to understand, we all understand it, but to do. How do we know the truth about ourselves so that we'll have clues to how we're interpreting the world out there? That is the radical self-awareness tool that we looked at, radical self-awareness. Jesus also said, "These things that I do, ye shall do also, and greater," which is a reminder that we too can know the truth and we can get free from all kinds of earthly limitations, like fear and worry and stress and alienation and depression that block our ability to manifest heaven on earth. All that love and peace and joy that this state of consciousness brings us. We can all have those things all the time. In the book of Revelations, John said, "Behold, I put before you an open door which no one can shut." Clearly, the heaven state of consciousness is available to each of us, but we have to step through that spiritual door ourselves. We have free will. We're completely free to keep letting our self-sabotaging egos live our lives. Yes, we're free to forfeit putting our true essence in the driver's seat in our lives. Every spiritual master has taught these truths that set us free. Buddha, Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita, the Sufi poets, the Tao masters, etc., etc. Truth is truth. The problem is that we often either don't know what freedom really is, or we don't go through that door. Maybe we just don't have any idea how to do it, or maybe something from our past makes us think that we don't deserve it. That door, which is always open to each one of us, is the door to heaven on earth consciousness, or enlightenment, which means constant peace, joy, and abundance. And by constant is meant that we don't have to wait for outer conditions or maybe our astrological lineup or something to be just right to enjoy it. We can maintain our perfect equilibrium no matter what is going on in the outer world if we live in our true essence and not our false personalities or our egos. This essence consciousness is what Buddha, Yogananda, Lord Krishna, Jesus, and many, many masters have taught us about. When our ego is in control, we are totally at the mercy of outer circumstances for our peace and happiness. Have you ever really thought about that? You know, we just wake up in the morning and we hope everything will be right that day. Well, guess what? It doesn't have to be right according to our programming. What happens usually is the ego gets triggered by something that we've been programmed to dislike, and we get mad, sad, or bad, and we react in unloving, negative, and self-sabotaging ways. We are fair-weather spiritual friends to ourselves and others, always on the verge of reacting like an unpredictable, unruly volcano or something, which is a pretty good metaphor for the ego. It's hard going through life cleaning up volcanic ashes and lava all the time from our constant eruptions. And we never really have peace because we don't know when it's going to erupt. It's totally dependent on the outer world circumstances lining up with our ego needs. And the odds of that happening perfectly all day are pretty slim, right? We say we believe in unity, and we do believe in unity, but then every time our ego gets triggered by someone's political, philosophical, or spiritual ideas, we create disunity. We say we believe in compassion, yet when bosses, neighbors, and family don't conform to our ideas of the way we think they ought to act, we judge them. If we're very present and centered and aware and being brutally honest with ourselves, we can start noticing our divisive reactions, which destroy our peace and our happiness. Did you know that 1 in 6 Americans take some kind of psychiatric drug, mostly antidepressants? One could deduce from that that most of us do want to be happier. That's the why for spiritual growth. And it's free, it's natural, and there are no side effects. The problem is that most of us don't know how to do it. Well, last week, for those of you who were here, we started talking about how to achieve this state of knowing the truth about ourselves and about life so that we can start getting free of what makes us unhappy. It involves a complete and total transformation, a complete rebirth. It's not a do-over of the ego, adding a little here or there. We're used to renovations in New Orleans, but a renovation involves making changes in the old structure. We're talking about a whole new house. Transformation is letting our old selves, our false personalities, go, freeing ourselves from what is causing our problems. So, this first step in transformation, the process, is what Reverend Robert Brummett calls radical self-awareness. The second step, you might remember, is deep self-acceptance. Each could be talked about separately for several months, but I introduced them together because if we start being really present and brutally honest with ourselves and radically aware of our actions, many of us might have the tendency to start judging ourselves. That's why we also have to concentrate on that second step at the same time. Deep self-acceptance is vital. For one thing, if we start judging ourselves, our minds will start buffering out what we see. That's just the way the mind works, because our ego will fight to maintain its existence. So if the ego feels threatened, it will just refuse to see those actions, and we won't be able to have that awareness. The truth is that most of what we're noticing in judging about ourselves is our false personality manifestations. It's not really who we are, our essence, at all. Speaking of radical self-acceptance, how did everyone do this week on taking mental selfies? Did anyone take some mental pictures of what was going on this week? I feel like I'm in my high school class and nobody did homework. Did you stay present and aware of your thoughts just a little more? Your words, your actions, a little more this week. Take some little photographs of what you're doing and saying and what you're thinking, how you're reacting to all that. Many people take selfies all day long to put on social media, right? To fabricate a life that they want others to believe they're living. That, of course, is the ego rigorously at work, trying to build an image of what it wants others to think of it. The ultimate ego publicity agent, I guess. But to take mental selfies in order to begin to understand ourselves is the courageous first step to enlightenment, or manifesting heaven on earth. Seeing how seldom our essence really runs our lives. You are your essence. Give it some control. We have to diagnose our problems before we can get well. So when we let ourselves see our triggers and even the chaos and unhappiness and anger that ensues because of those triggers, we can begin to understand our false personality and our stimulus response machine, which is what we live in most of the time. Since we're only seeing reality through our programmed lenses, we need to know something about these lenses. We ultimately want to get to the point where, it's a great mystic once said, nothing is ever between us and reality. Nothing. No programming, no filters, no convoluted lenses, a point where nothing colors what we see. We will see truth at that point. That is the peace and love and abundance which passeth all understanding. As we are so blinded by our perceptions of the world that we can't really see the truth of it. We color most of life black or red, meaning that we're mad or sad a lot of the time. Our stimulus response machines just aren't free. We're at the mercy of other people's manifestations, the political situations, the world's bifurcations, and our own provocations at all times. And the point isn't to deny the outside world at all. The point is to be totally and completely and clearly aware of the truth of it, with nothing blinding or getting it out of focus. Radical self-awareness helps us see what needs to be healed in ourselves so that we can see the truth that sets us free. For example, if we really notice what we dislike about others, not what we think is unlikable about others, but what we dislike about others, it's a clue to what we don't like about ourselves and what we need to have deep self-acceptance about. The Course of Miracles and much modern psychiatry says that when we condemn others, we are merely projecting on them what we think of ourselves but don't want to deal with. And it's better to deal with it than to live with it unconsciously. If we own up to what is really causing us to dislike others and deal with this unconscious self-hatred, we can free ourselves from it. That is deep self-acceptance. And remember that these ego manifestations aren't really even you. And others' egos manifestations are not really who they are either. It's just our and their false personalities. It's not their essence. It's sort of like an abused rescue dog that seems vicious because it's self-protective and always snapping and growling at others. But once it is loved and cared for and feels secure for a while, it turns into a loving puppy, man's best friend. That's what manifests usually. If someone threatens your philosophical, political, or religious prized views, do you lash out at them, either verbally or in your mind? Take a snapshot. If someone doesn't treat you like you've been conditioned to expect, do you get angry? Just start being aware. That's all it is. Be aware of what you're doing and thinking, and then your reactions to that. Your stress, negativity, and judgments aren't a peaceful way for you to live. Notice when your shoulders are tight, when your stomach or your heart kind of hurts, when you can't think straight because you're upset. These are symptoms of being triggered. Just take a snapshot. Notice that. This is very helpful. Unity co-founder Charles Fillmore had a lot to say about this in his book, Dynamics for Living. He talked about how much our subconscious mind is filled with unknown conditioning and baggage, and how important it is to be aware of this, to be aware of how much our unconscious is constantly coloring everything we perceive, to the point where we often have no idea what truth is. Fillmore goes on to say that what we want to do is to learn to open up to our superconscious mind, which is behind the subconscious, which often clouds it over. This superconscious mind is the divine, God. When we learn to go beyond our unconscious mind and memories and conditioning and become one with this superconscious mind, we no longer have the need, the ego needs for security and comfort and control as we presently understand them. It's very freeing. In terms of deep self-acceptance, a useful tool is to quit terming anything as a mistake. Every so-called error is just another way that didn't work, which gets you another step closer to what does work. Every manifestation of your societally programmed ego, your false personality, helps you understand it better and ultimately get closer to being able to let it go and let your essence run your life. Don't cling to or reject any of your so-called mistakes. Just notice them and return to your breath. Return to your practice, remembering to deeply accept yourself and to be grateful for your progress. The third step on the path to self-transformation is unlimited forgiveness. When we truly start being aware of what we're doing, how we're reacting to our environment according to our triggers, programming, and subconscious minds, it becomes a whole lot easier to forgive. We realize there's nothing to forgive out there. It's our thoughts about them that need to be healed. And this is especially true in the case of yourself. You must forgive yourself by realizing that there's nothing to forgive. You were doing the very best you could at the time. And everyone else is doing their best too. Everything can be a learning experience. When we see the world in a more realistic way, we see clearly that there is nothing to forgive. That's a hard one, I know. We just observe, we learn from our so-called mistakes, and we get back on track. If you're judging yourself or someone else, stop and say, I forgive you now. The fourth step to totally transforming ourselves is universal benevolence. This is easy to accept intellectually. Loving and having compassion for everyone is the new religion of the 21st century, but it is extremely difficult to do when our buttons are pushed and it's not just some idea. When our egos are not healed, it's almost impossible to heal that and to have universal benevolence. We just can't get out of the negative reaction. We have to work on ourselves a lot to become capable of universal benevolence all the time. But Rome wasn't built in a day, and total transformation doesn't happen overnight either. Have patience, have faith. You can evolve more and get freer more every single day, which means you'll be happier and more peaceful every single day. And that brings us to the fifth step, which is compassionate communication. When we truly understand others, it's much easier to forgive and have compassion. How often we are so intent on being right that we have no idea of, or maybe we just don't care how divisive we are really being. We hurt people, we put them down, we're so intent on defending some long-treasured spiritual, philosophical, and maybe political stance that we're perfectly okay creating disunity. Compassionate communication is putting unity and other people before idealistic, political, or spiritual dogma, because that ultimately is what all that is about, is creating unity, the oneness of all life. Sincere, honest, compassionate communication can help us avoid all kinds of personal chaos. These 5 practices can be the core of a truly advanced spiritual student who wants to totally transform his or her life. Understanding them intellectually is easy. Few disagree with them. However, putting them into practice 24/7 so that we can change our lives is another matter. It takes right aim, it takes steadfastness, it takes a lot of attention and patience, but it's so worth it. Keep in mind, while you're doing it though, that the ego will resist these spiritual practices in a variety of ways. Your ego's been running your life for a long time. It doesn't want to let go. It will rationalize, it will deny, it will doubt, it will distract and delude you. It wants to maintain control of your life. The truth, though, is that when you do diminish its control, you birth a greater reality, and you actually have more control of your life. Think on these things. We're all on this path, traveling from personal ego self to divine God awareness. Your true essence. That's what your essence is. It's the path that every spiritual teaching urges us to follow for our own good and for the good of the world. This week, I invite you to really concentrate on your spiritual practice. You can do this formally or informally. Both are equally powerful. Formal practice is when you take time out of your day to meditate or sit still and concentrate on your breathing, letting your monkey mind and those 10,000 thoughts go. This helps you disengage from habituated thought processes that reinforce your ego structure. Just notice your thoughts and emotions as they arise, but don't believe them. They aren't you. They are just automatic, programmed responses to your environment. Don't resist or indulge any thought or emotion. Just notice it and go back to your breath, back to your practice. Informal practice is when you use every minute of your day as feedback, grist for the mill for your practice. You notice your actions, your words, your thoughts, your emotions in order to make a composite picture of your stimulus response machine. You know where your left foot is, where your right pinky is, where your mind are at all times. That's hard. You notice when you're spacing out, and you notice why, for example. What is happening? Why might you be reacting the way you are? Are you projecting snakes onto the stick that's in the road again and reacting with fear to the snake that you're projecting onto that neutral stick again? And above all, remember that this practice isn't about self-improvement or renovation. It's about total renewal, transforming yourself into the real you, your perfect, loving, pure, godlike essence, your Christ self. It's becoming a member of Humans Anonymous, a spiritual conspiracy of those who want to recover from egocentricity, which is endemic among humans. Think on these things. Each is given a bag of tools, a solid rock, a book of rules. And each doth make, when life hath flown, a stumbling block or a stepping stone. So claim your divine birthright. Claim that inheritance which has been yours from the beginning. Walk through that door. Do the things that Jesus and the great masters have all done, and greater things. Know the truth that will set you free of your ego, your false personality, and claim your divine essence, which is what you really are, so that you can enjoy the peace and love of the kingdom of heaven on earth. Make with your tools the stepping stone that can lift you to the door to heaven on earth. May God's order and harmony be established in you and in your affairs, starting today.